Okay, let's go ahead and get going this afternoon. Appreciate everyone joining us for the Dairy Forage Seminar Series. My name is Dennis Hancock. I get to be the Center Director for the U.S. Dairy Forage Research Center. We are with USDA ARS. We're located here in Madison with our main building. We also have locations in Prairie du Sac and Marshfield as well. Really glad to be able to bring you these seminars. We've got some outstanding speakers this week. And the next up in our list of speakers are a couple of producers who you'll see some of their entries in the displays out behind us here with the World Forage Analysis Super Bowl. Really outstanding producers, and we have invited them to come and talk a little bit about some of their strategies for producing high quality forage and how they operate their dairy farm in Hastings, Michigan. So Luke and Ethan Haywood, thank you guys for being here.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Luke Haywood. This is my son Ethan. We are from Hastings, Michigan, and so the other side of the Great Lake here.
So just a little bit about the herd that we're milking. Our Holsteins have close to 33,000 pound rolling average, Jerseys about 23,000 pounds. And really for our milk market and a lot of the people around here, we're pushing for protein. We've really tailored our forage program to trying to feed as much forage as we can while pushing those pounds of protein. That's why the Jerseys are in the herd, and really what our overall goal is making pounds of protein.
So talk a little bit about our cropping system. We're in the business of making milk. And so in order to do that, our primary goal is to focus on crops that will assist us in providing the highest quality and highest quantity of digestible nutrients for the cows. So we focus a lot on corn silage because it's a very consistent and very high quality forage that we have found year after year is very repeatable. We do also do quite a bit of alfalfa haylage. The diet consists of 20 to 25 pounds of dry matter of corn silage, and then anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds of dry matter of haylage. Recently, we've done some more grass silages or alternative silages that have proven to be very digestible and have shown some promise to potentially integrate into our diets. And some of the alternative forages also help us in a rescue situation where we're either short on forage or Mother Nature's not cooperating with us and we can't do our traditional forages. And then obviously we grow a lot of our own grain as well, and some of that is high moisture corn as well as dry corn, but typically high moisture is limited because of the amount of dry matter of corn silage that we like to feed to the dairy.
So quality and consistency are our goals for forage, and that's not necessarily what we're working with in terms of our land base. Fairly urbanized area of Michigan. You can see a lot of trees, a lot of swamps, a lot of small stuff, and we farm stuff on all four corners of that map. So the furthest forages that we're chopping are about 12 miles from the farm. We're doing a lot of sand, a lot of BMR corn on sand, so pretty intensive irrigation and fertilization, as well as some clay, some muck, some stuff that's tiled, some stuff that's irrigated on the top of the hill and tiled at the bottom of the hill. Just a lot of variety that we're dealing with, and then just a lot of small fields, a lot of road travel. So when we go through and cut hay, we're cutting over 25 fields of hay, a lot of different shapes, a lot of different sizes, and then trying to get that harvested all at the right moisture at the right time.
So what we focus on for forages is number one, we need to look at what genetics that we want to use. Over the last 25 to 30 years, we've really focused on NDFD. What can we grow that is digestible, that will translate to milk and not translate to manure? Another strategy is we look at our interval for cutting alfalfa. And then when we're harvesting, what quality of processing do we get on our corn silage? What's the quality of chop length on our haylage? And then ultimately preserving these products, this investment in the bunk, what can we do to maximize the amount of feed that we keep, minimize dry matter losses, and keep a high quality feed out for the cows.
So under the genetics portion of things, we're pretty aggressive on our cow genetics, and we try and do the same with our forage genetics. Every time we buy a bag of seed, the cow on the right-hand side is what we're thinking about. What is she going to be able to use? What's going to be the most useful to her? We like to break it down, things that cows can digest and things that cows cannot digest. So we're just trying to select for the lowest lignin content as we can get genetically. And then obviously there's a lot of management that goes on from there, but that's our number one step, and one of the things that we think is our strength is we spend the money, we do the research to try and get the varieties that we want to work with long term. And then on the cow side, we're selecting for feed efficiency, cows that do a good job at making these forages into milk. And we're in the business of making milk, like Dad said, but we have to make sure we have the cows that are going to do that for us.
So when we're going through our planning phases and looking at the genetics that are available to assist us in forage production, probably number one is lignin is inversely related to digestibility. So we are trying to search for low lignin products, whether that's alfalfa or corn silage. 30 years ago, we started testing corn silages for NDFD, and so we started to try and figure out not all corns are created equal. So we really rely heavily on fiber digestibility, but then on the other side, we don't want to give up starch because we know that's an additional cost when we have to add it back to the diet. So not only starch quantity, but digestible starch, and whether that's a hard, flinty corn or if it's a soft, floury endosperm in your corn silage that is either more readily available sooner or versus, excreting it out in the manure. With everything, as we select for the high digestibility products, inherently there are trade-offs, and some of that might be agronomically, whether it's the strength or yields. We're focusing on maximizing our investment on a limited number of acres, and so we need to not give up yield, but we need to be able to grow the best quality forages. And so it's a juggling act. Many of our corn silage acres are irrigated, which minimizes the risk for drought, and that helps ensure yield and quantity in the bunk that cows can eat. In a drought year, corn silage quality is great, and some nutritionists will say that cows don't care if it's drought stress. Well, they care if they don't get to eat because the bunk's not full, and so we've got to make sure that the bunk is full, that we've got adequate inventory. And over the years, as we've looked at brown midrib corn silages, we have discovered that not all brown midribs are created equal. As we look at BM1 versus BM3 genetics, we have found the right fit with the BM3 genetics for us because we get that little extra bump in NDFD and not give up too much on the yield side.
When we talk about trying things on our farm, it's not, we're going to try this year, try this year. We're not afraid to plant a lot of things in one field, harvest them individually, do a lot of testing, do a lot of samples, do a lot of weights, send a partially full truck back to the silo just so we can get an individual weight on that. We've had 100-acre alfalfa fields that we've got 4 different varieties and strips in there, and we're going out and trying them out. We've got a couple of test plots that have got 30+ varieties each. And we're just trying to try different things under different conditions every year on a small amount of acres ourselves so that we can really tell. When you look at a seed booklet, there's a lot of labeling and a lot of comparisons within that company, but how it does on our own ground is something that is really important to us because it's a really long-term investment, whether it's that corn silage we've got to live with for a year or that hay seeding that we're hoping to live with for 4, 5, 6 years or more. So we did a lot of testing, and part of our climate challenge is we want the least hardy plants by selecting for high digestibility, but they've got to be hardy enough to withstand our Michigan winters, especially in an alfalfa seeding or any sort of other grass. So we've done a lot of trials. We've got some fields that go underwater, and we found grasses that do well there. We've got some alfalfa fields that get a lot of wind in the winter and get a lot of winter kill, and we found strong varieties that go there. We're not afraid to mix a lot of things on different acres just to try and maximize the effectiveness for our operation. We're also not afraid to do things small scale if we have to chase the quality. We do a lot of alfalfa on the local airport that's across the road. So you're looking at 80 acres of alfalfa broken into about 12 chunks, and they're all triangles. So that's beautiful to chop, a lot of triangles. But we are willing to put in the extra labor, the extra fuel, the extra time, and the extra machine wear to try and produce the highest quality product we can, because we think that pencils out in the cow pen.
So when we're selecting our corn silage hybrids, number one, we got to look at the population of animals that we're going to feed. And so we've got milk cows, obviously, we've got dry cows, we've got heifers. We don't need to feed BMR corn silage to dry cows and heifers. And so we are blessed with having a lot of different bunker silos. We've probably got 12 different bunker silos. So we can manage a population of animals by growing different hybrids or varieties of a conventional corn silage hybrid for dry cows and heifers. When we look at our corn enterprise, it's very intensively managed. We're a CAFO in Michigan, so we're doing soil samples, grid soil samples every 3 years to know what nutrients we've got out there. We're testing manures prior to application to feed the crop as a fertilizer. So obviously we're going to have organic N and some residual N from several years of having manure applied. And so prior to side dress, we're going to do PSNTs. We're going to try and figure out what kind of feed is already out there for the crop and what do we need to supply with the side dress. And so we farm several different types of ground. We've got sand, we've got clay, irrigated sand, irrigated clay. And so depending on the farm might depend on the management strategy. We did a little more urea and protected nitrogen this year on some of the clay fields. We did a lot of the larger, higher volume fields of sand with anhydrous because it was cheaper. So after side dress, we're continuing to look at that crop, look at the health, look at its nutrient needs or demands. We had a lot of rain, fortunately, over in Michigan this summer, but unfortunately we lost a lot of our nitrogen. And so we were doing tissue testing on the plants 2 or 3 weeks upon a time to figure out how much of that nitrogen was still there. And we determined that in order to not give up yield, we were going to supplement some nitrogen through the fertigation. And as we continued through that process, even through harvest, at the end of the harvest, we're doing stock tissue samples to determine if we had adequate N, did we short the crop, do we have leftover N that potentially could be wasted. Late season, we always like to do fungicides on our brown midrib hybrids. They're very susceptible to leaf diseases. We've got tar spot in Michigan that's really becoming a problem for us, and so we've done fungicides for 10 years probably, and it's just part of the program. It's a good investment to protect that crop so that we ensure that we keep it healthy until the optimum harvest time, and we have a larger harvest window because it doesn't dry down too fast and get away from us. Ultimately, that could affect digestibility as we get to some of those drier forages.
When we roll around to corn silage season, we're fighting a lot of variables in Michigan. We can have a pretty temperamental weather window. We were pretty blessed this year that we were hot and we were dry, but that made it a fast harvest as well. The other thing with planting as many BMR acres as we have, if you grow it, you know that once it starts to dry down, it's all getting dry, it's all going at once. So we're trying to put corn in that bunk as quick as possible. It's hard to see, but you can see one of our 3 corn silage bunkers here. And once we get a pile going there, for one chopper, it's not uncommon for us to run 4 tractors. That packing is so huge to us. We'll spend the money. The hardest thing is getting enough bodies to keep those tractors moving. I know anybody that's chopping corn knows it's hard to find enough people to keep those trucks and those tractors moving. But that's an investment that we feel is really necessary. It's just really investing, taking the time to do that right, having the time for one of those packer guys to be out of the tractor at least once an hour, to be checking that kernel processing, to be checking, make sure our shredlets processor is shredding the way we want, to make sure that cut length is the way that we want. When you get going on day 7 of corn silage, it's about 11:30 at night and you got another 20, 25 acres you want to knock out before you turn the crew loose for the night. It's really easy to just stay in the cab and keep pushing feed. But we try and make sure that we are very specific about constantly monitoring that silage that's going in the bunk, so that the stuff in the very back there by the road is the same exact feed that's here by the toe, and our cows are going to have something very consistent throughout the season. Then whenever we move on to a new pile, a couple of those tractors will go to the other pile, a couple of them will stay, give another couple hours the next day of packing right on top of that same pile, and then we're going to go through and get that pile covered the same day. I forgot to include a picture, but we've got an awesome covering crew. Our tires go on in a grid pattern. There's a tire on every square inch of that pile, except for the very edges where there's gravel bags surrounding all 4 sides of those piles. And just sealing that up as tight as we can. Before they were coming out with double layer plastic, we were putting down the biofilm layer as well as the heavy protectant layer. Now it's a 2-in-1. That's really slick for our crew. Spending the money on tires, spending the money on the crew, getting up early and getting that pile covered before it's hot the next day. And then we also are pretty aggressive on utilizing inoculants. Whether we're making grass silage for dry cows or our best BMR corn for our milk cows, it's important to us that this feed is preserved as well as possible. Spend the money on the front side and it's going to make us the profit on the back side. We've tried lots of different inoculants in lots of different forms, and at the end of the day, it's very important for us to just make sure we're using enough, make sure that we're checking that equipment is in good shape and working properly, and that we're not diluting that rate down to try and save a penny during harvest and pay for it the next summer when that corn silage is warm. We'll make sure we spend that money up front.
So as we focus on high quality digestible forages for the dairy cows, agronomically there are multiple challenges that we deal with, and we try and develop management strategies around them. Inherently, as we select for high digestibility, sometimes there's trade-offs, and those are trade-offs that we're willing to figure out how to manage around, whether it's pest or disease susceptibility, possibly yield lags. We'll use fungicides, we'll use irrigation, we'll feed that crop multiple times during the growing season. We'll do whatever it takes to end up with the highest quality product at the end. As I mentioned, we farm sand and clay, and we irrigate both sand and clay, mostly because that gives us a controlled variable that we can control. I really like sand because we can turn the water on and turn it off when you need to harvest, and then when you're done harvesting, you can go spread manure. All you have to do is pay the energy bill, right? And pay for the equipment. But I think irrigation on a large portion of our forage acres has helped us minimize risk, because that ensures that we have a full bunk at the end of the season, and that it gives us the most flexibility with the diet for the year or year and a half after that we put that crop up. And I think these management strategies also help us maximize our harvest window as far as getting the highest quality feed put up in a reasonable amount of time, because we're doing everything ourselves. We're not relying on a custom operator. We've got all our own equipment. We're doing the cow work, we're doing the crop work. And so we need to hit that harvest window as accurately as we can.
We spoke a little bit earlier, but tar spot is probably the newest and latest, greatest challenge that we're facing. I'm sure that a lot of producers that are south of us saw it a lot earlier than us. This would be our second year where we're really battling it, and we see a lot of different corn varieties just overnight they die and they're gone, and our window for making good silage is gone in that process. So the next thing that we're doing is checking out a lot of different varieties. Where's that balance between digestibility and leaf disease resistance? And then what can we do? Spending that money on that late season fungicide, flying it on with a plane. We did some irrigation fungicides this year and did some testing with that. And just that's our latest challenge that we're really working to overcome.
When we look at the haylage digestibility, we've recently begun to transition most of our acres to the high digestibility or lower lignin type varieties. Prior to that, we did quite a lot of experimenting with shorter cutting intervals, where it'd be 22 to 24 days was not uncommon. Now that we're going more towards the reduced lignin type varieties or hybrids, we are looking more at a standard 26 to 28 day. We are not really interested in trying to lengthen that out to 30 or 32 days to get more yield. We're still convinced that we need to keep it under 4 weeks to maximize our quality. And in doing so, it probably ensures us 5 cuttings every year. This year we'll be looking at a 6th cutting. Harvesting haylage is very expensive for us because we have a lot of little fields spread all over the county, and nothing is very efficient with small fields. We cut 600 acres of hay over the course of 3 days, and it's a long drawn-out process, but we feel that the hay is on dry land or more marginal sandy fields that we couldn't insure a corn crop, or we don't want to take the risk with a corn crop that some of these hay acres can be very profitable and very productive with some of the newer hay hybrids. And then trying to hit that harvest window has always been a challenge. I think the last 10 years we've trended towards a little bit drier haylage. It fits our diet a little bit better when we're feeding a high corn silage diet or some of the wetter commodities in the diet.
So a lot of times when we're talking about doing forage cropping, the equipment's a very large component of that. On the front side, a very important part that we've really tuned in the last 3 or 4 years is the manure management portion, doing all our own injection work. You can see some of the fun hills that we're dealing with. It's a lot of fun to climb that with semis when you're chopping, and it's a lot of fun to try and climb it with manure equipment when you get done chopping. And then as well as running 2 32-foot mowers and a cloth chopper. We're very comfortable with our equipment, and the equipment's a big part of it, and then finding enough operators that care about the forage quality coming behind that equipment is pretty important. Whether your hay mower guys are getting out every field and changing those fins depending on how light the hay is, that your chopper guy is checking that cut length every single field, and that your manure guy is making sure that he gets into the corners, he gets into the edges, because when you're farming 10-acre fields, then a very large percentage of that is headland. You got to make sure you're doing a good job on the headland as well as the middle of the field. So just the investment that we've developed in our equipment, as well as the investment that we've developed in our operators and working with. We're lucky that I've got 4 brothers, so it helps out coming up with a lot of operators. And then just the guys that we work with, trying to instill a care about the feed that's coming out, not just a number of hours it takes us to get this feed put up.
So occasionally Mother Nature throws us a curveball. It seems like it's on a regular basis, actually. And so we are forced into situations where we have to make a cropping decision to make the best decision that we can deal with the card that Mother Nature dealt with us. We've got some river floodplain ground that there's been years in June we've got the river up on it and we can't get a crop in there. And so we've gone in with some Sudax or forage soybeans, try and get something out of those acres that we can feed to dry cows or young stock. We've done some alternative forages, buying some soybean straw when wheat straw was not available to bulk up that dry cow diet, because all we've got is corn silage and she doesn't need that many nutrients. And so we're looking at anything and everything that might fit into the portfolio. This last year we experimented with some Italian ryegrass as a haylage substitute, and that worked very well for us. Our management strategy was to put that in, take a couple cuttings off, and then put in alfalfa after that. And so that helped fill that niche to give us some milk cow feed in a very short turnaround. And so we were glad to add that to our portfolio.
Being from Michigan, it's the second most diverse state as far as crops, so there's a lot of alternative forages and other things out there that aren't necessarily forage that we turn into forage. There's we turned a lot of heads when we run the hay mower through a soybean field, but we planted alfalfa in after that, and it worked pretty well for us. This is an example of some of the Sudex and bean mix in here. This was the river floodplain. We had some nice hip-high corn about the 4th of July, and then we were, the 4th of July, we were canoeing over top of the hip-high corn because it flooded out. And then when that water finally receded, we came back in and planted Sudex, and we planted soybeans and went down and mowed those as a forage. And just a lot of challenges that we face, and as Michigan dairy farmers, we probably have a pretty bad rap of lack of crop rotation. And that's something that we've struggled with as well, just because of our limited acres. And of those limited acres, only so many of them will support corn. And then we've got to find something else to grow on the other ones. So in order to try and rotate those crops around and get something other than corn in there, we try a lot of alternative forages that'll actually ton up for us still. But then there's something that we can follow with alfalfa, or something we can follow with manure and get manure on a field that normally we wouldn't throughout the corn silage season.
So at the end of the day, we're making feed for cows, and we're trying to do the best we can to deliver a high quality, consistent product to our animals. Our milk production is our top priority. In order to achieve the levels that we are shooting for, I think our forage management program is probably the key to that. So with that, we'd like to thank you for attending this afternoon and open it up to any questions.
So he was asking if we have a lot of fields that are pretty far from the farm. Do we have a different program for maintaining the integrity and the soil structure there because it's so much harder to put manure on them, or not possible? And then do we intend on using cover crops in the future?
We do have a plan or strategy. We apply manure 10 or 12 miles away. We've got a frac tank, so that's very expensive. But ultimately, we've got to buy nutrients, or we've got to transport those nutrients, and so that's one of the challenges that we've tried to address. Probably for the last 5 years, we've consistently used cover crops. Rye has been the easiest for us, mostly because of the time period that it takes to establish the cover crop. In Michigan, when we get the corn silage crop off, there's not a lot of growing days left for some of the deeper root penetrating cover crops. I like cover crops mostly because I think if there are any excess nutrients that we may have put out there, maybe we can catch and harvest some of those and preserve them for next year.
We'll run into an interesting scenario once in a while where we've got cover crops on a field and we got rye and we can't get in there to plant that, and that rye ends up going from a cover crop to a harvestable crop for us every once in a while. Like you said, with the frac tank, we're running 6 semi-trucks to a drag line system. So we'll run 12 miles away after grain corn comes off even, or we run early in the spring. And 6th-generation dairy farmers understand that typically FOS is a limiting factor you've got on that home farm, and we've got to find a way to get away from that home farm and be responsible stewards of the land, and that's what that investment has allowed us to do.
So the question is, if our focus is on NDFD, why are we staying with alfalfa silages rather than grass silages? Is that correct? Well, we're a little slow to learn sometimes in Michigan. I think we've discovered how the grass might fit well into our diets. We haven't had a lot of experience in our area with grass production as they have in some of the neighboring states. Rumen health, I guess, is the main reason that we have alfalfa silage, period. Just trying to maintain a healthy rumen and a cow that we're pushing to the limit. We're right on the edge of acidosis every day, and we're asking more and more of that cow, and it's more of a safety factor, and just to make sure that we don't crash and burn, I guess.
What people have done with ryegrass, what we saw is they let it get super ripe and turn it into heifer feed, and we didn't see a lot of people in our area, cutting it adequately and trying to make cow feed out of it. And then with the haylage, our pressure point has been trying to make that milk protein, and that haylage has been very effective for us in the past with that milk protein, but we're really excited about the possibility of tons of ryeage per acre, and then the flexibility that we have there.
I guess the biggest drawback we found with the grasses is on our sand ground, alfalfa, we can guarantee there will be something to harvest when we go out there for second or third or fourth, but on the grasses, if they're not underwater, we may or may not be coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you talk a lot of different kinds of forages here. Are all those going into a separate bunker, or is it bags, or ryegrass, you got a whole bunker of that, and a whole bunker of Italian?
When our truck drivers come in the silo, we're talking about how many bunkers we've got and a lot of different products. When our truck drivers come in the silo, sometimes they just drive in circles trying to figure out what bunk we're going to, because there's bunks everywhere. And it's a classic expansion scenario. They all face different ways, they're all bagged differently. But we have a lot of small bunks, and we do a lot of different things. Everything goes in a different bunk. If we're doing trials, we were doing some trials with the new floury starch. We bring in a bagger and we'll bag stuff separately, but typically it's all going in bunks, and we're trying to maximize the property that we've got.
And all the bunks have
Everything's 3-walled.
Yeah. Well, inherently this year we had plenty of forage, so there were more challenges with storage. So fifth gutting went on top of fourth gutting with a haylage. We don't like to do that, mostly because it's harder to feed out. We had a pile of Italian ryegrass that got buried in corn silage, and so there are going to be challenges when we go to feed out stuff. But I guess we thank God that we had a bountiful crop, and that we know that we have plenty of forage, unlike our neighbors on the west part of the U.S. So.
water source for irrigation of those wells?
We've got wells, and we pull out of rivers. We've got, I think, 30 different irrigation systems, and majority of those are wells. Probably 2/3 are wells, and a third are surface water.